Hello everybody, my name is James Hamill. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope over the next 45 minutes that I at least part some information that is of use to you. So what we're going to talk about is how you can achieve a guaranteed passive full arch restoration in just 2 appointments. As with all education, we have to provide some objectives. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how you can deliver full arch restorations in 2 appointments in over 90% of cases. We're going to discuss what we call Passivity Plus, which is going to help you achieve a passive outcome. We're going to look at 4 full arch workflow options and their clinical applications. And we'll hopefully be able to help you identify on how to select the appropriate workflow based on your clinical and technological situation. So we're going to look now at this point a little bit of a backtrack on some traditional full arch restoration methods and how still a lot of people do it. We're going to have a little look at the growing digital demand that's out there, but also some of the barriers and more of the positive rewards of digitizing your restorative workflow. I'm going to shine a light on the passivity side of things because we believe that that's extremely important. And you'll have a little look at Passivity Plus technology. The 4 workflows or pathways we're going to discuss are Photogrammetry, and then our own version called Grammetry, which covers Grammetry ArchBridge and Grammetry Optisplint, and another workflow called iJig. And hopefully at the end of all of that, we'll be able to put you in a situation where one of those workflows potentially works for you and your practice. So traditionally, many of us started using this type of process. We started with a stock tray, primary impression of our initial clinical situation. And from that, the lab were then tasked with making usually what was an open special tray or a secondary tray. And this tray was designed often in an analog format using something like shellac or acrylic. But nowadays we can obviously create that digitally. But ultimately, this impression tray was going to head back to you, maybe with a wax rim. Sometimes that was a separate appointment for you to be able to record some vital information. Your implant position, the vertical position of the patient, the occlusion, center line, smile line perhaps, tooth position, all of this information that the lab was going to require to get to the next stage. But we were at this stage 2 appointments in. When that went back to the laboratory, their job was to create the master model. However, that master model needed to be verified. We weren't going to accept generally that second impression was absolutely 100% accurate because we were about to now start making some fairly expensive laboratory work. So typically the lab would make some form of verification jig, and there's lots of different ways that this was made, or these were made, but ultimately that verification jig went back for appointment 3. In some cases, this could be appointment 4, for you to try in the mouth, confirm that what the lab was seeing on their model was the same as what you were seeing in the mouth. And that was a very important step. Generally at that appointment, there was also some form of wax try-in, again, to confirm that we had the bite right, the vertical was right, and the teeth were in the correct position, and that ultimately the patient was happy with what the bridge was going to be like when delivered. So that was into appointment 3. And when that came back to the lab, nowadays, that's often digitized in the lab or sent away to be digitized. A digital design of the framework or the metalwork is then done and milled. However, in some labs, this is still done very traditionally with a traditional wax up and casting of the bar. But no matter, we were at the point where we were going to have some metal generally created. And that metal would have then been sent back, tried in the mouth, ensure that everything was okay. Sometimes there was teeth on that metal. Sometimes that was even an extra appointment. And all of this was to really allow you to verify to make sure that what the lab was producing was correct for the patient. And we were really into 5, if not 6 appointments at this point. If everything was good, back to the lab, final manufacture, out it came, and then there was the fit. And overall, this added up to quite a significant amount of chairside time, the most valuable resource that you have in practice. More shipments, more potentially adjustments. And overall, if you looked at this, for a single arch, this could take anything up to 5 hours. And when we look at it, that's a reasonably inefficient way to work, especially with the digital technology that's available. And there's a huge amount of interest in digital workflows out there. And many dentists are sitting on the fence. They're a little bit nervous about moving forward. And hopefully part of this presentation will maybe answer some of those questions that some of you may have. But why are dentists and why are practices looking at the digital workflow arch? Well, a lot of it's to do with the clinical side, where we want to have fewer appointments. That obviously leads to a more efficient process. Ultimately, it can create more accuracy, and therefore we can hopefully reduce the amount of problems that we may have with these types of cases, because accuracy is clearly important, creating a smoother clinical process, trying to eliminate that verification step. Importantly, digital workflows often, not always, but often help us improve the communication between the laboratory and the clinic. And there are improved manufacturing options available now to the labs to give us increased precision and ultimately better results. And in behind all of that, there is a commercial aspect where this reduced number of appointments frees up chairside time to be utilised for maybe the delivery of other services, more predictable case costs, because the process is more predictable step by step, and that leads to improved profitability, something that every practice wants to try to achieve. But there's also one more thing that we have to think about, and that's really the increased demand and popularity of this word, creating passivity. And often passivity is a little bit misunderstood, but ultimately what we're trying to do is produce a very predictable fit of the final restoration. I would say, and certainly many of my colleagues who have been involved in this work for some time, passivity was something that we relied on the lab to try to achieve. And often we assumed that that was what was happening. And we probably didn't feel that we had a huge amount of control over it. But passivity is extremely important. And as somebody or as a clinician has to make a decision here, whether they're going to enter into a digital workflow or not, sometimes the hesitation can creep in. And this can be difficult for some people to really try to manage all of that information. And so there are 3 main areas I think that we need to look at. We need to look at some of the questions around the clinical uncertainty, some of the questions around commercial aspect of it, but also who you choose as your lab partner in this digital world is also extremely vital. And all of these things add up to how good the end result is going to be. So from a clinical point of view, sometimes there's a confusion simply in the terminology that we use. What does it all mean and how relevant is it to you in your practice or for your patients? And I like to think that we might be able to cover some of those things as we go through the next few minutes. Data is critically important. In the digital ecosystem, the accuracy of the data at the start is critical. How we get off the runway is probably the most important part of the process. Just because we're sending in digital data to a dental laboratory, it doesn't mean that that can be manipulated if it's poor. If it's poor data, it's poor data. And therefore the starting point and the end result is going to be affected. So accuracy of data or records is absolutely critical, just like it is in the analog world. We've got lots of talk about microns. And I think some of the confusion here is that there's a natural presumption from many dentists that the accuracy they create at the initial record, whenever they use a certain scanner or photogrammetry, is going to be translated through the entire process. That's not the case. There are lots of steps that have to go that a full ArchBridge goes through. So it goes through CAD, it goes through the CAM side, where strategy of the milling machine is important. Then you've got the practical aspect of milling. So for example, if a milling machine is being used with worn tools, that is going to affect the accuracy of the final bridge. Even the temperature of the room that the milling machine is kept in and the humidity will affect the accuracy of the milling. And so then it goes to sintering, and it goes to manual handling. All of these things will have an impact, maybe positive, also potentially negative. And so the accuracy can deplete across that workflow. So it is important to understand that. There is also potentially a trust issue. So for dentists to be able to move from one workflow to another, they have to trust it. But one of the common things is whether or not AMUAs should be trusted. And we have these conversations on a regular basis with dentists who have had maybe bad experiences with AMUAs. Screw loosening, screw breakage are probably the two most common ones. And the other one is debonding of tie bases. I would argue that in a lot of those situations, that is due to a lack of passivity in the restoration and an inaccuracy of the record. And perhaps we need to look at that rather than being a negative. It's potentially a positive in that the system has failed at one of its weakest links. And that is a warning for us that we maybe need to go back a step or two to start to figure out why. Skills of not only the dentist who's providing the information, but their team can also be a source of worry in that, am I good enough? Am I able to take these records? Am I better not just sticking to what I know? And that's sometimes a question that needs to be answered. And that's where the support that is required for these types of workflows is so important. So the education and the training. And then we've got questions around materials. Should we have monolithic zirconia? Should we put a tie bar in it? Should we use castable, milled? Should it be acrylic? Should it be PMMA? The list goes on. So we need to make sure that we have trust or a fundamental belief in the materials that we're using. And quite often the failure of the materials is down to a lack of planning, so a lack of restorative space, but also take you back to the fact that quite often it's also due to a lack of passivity with the frameworks and the restorations that were fitted. And so the stress builds in and the material fails. So in terms of the commercial uncertainty, many practices are at this stage thinking about, do they invest in a digital process? Do we have to buy a photogrammetry machine? Do we buy a horizontal scan body kit? And some of that creates barriers to people actually making the decisions. And so we're concerned about the digital cycle. So what's the ongoing cost? We all know that often entering into these things, that there is going to be maybe perhaps an annual cost. Is there a software cost? What about the hardware, laptops and computers, etc.? All of these things can create unknown costs per case. And quite often it's trying to keep that as simple as we possibly can becomes the most cost-effective way to enter into these workflows. So we want to have some form of return on our investment. And then finally is your lab partner. So how good is your lab, or how experienced is your lab at managing these data sets? Because it's a very different world in the laboratory from the analog world. And the CAD abilities, so how this data is taken and stitched together. So all of these workflows are a series of files, and how these files are handled within the software is a big part of how good the end result is going to be. So it's okay to question the CAD abilities of the laboratory that you're sending the work to. As well as that, we also have to think about the CAM abilities. So what are the strategies? How good is the lab at producing this work in a predictable manner? How much manual handling is done? And and how well serviced are the machines, how well are the machines looked after. All of these things will have effects. So that really creates sometimes a situation where moving out of our comfort zone as dentists can be a little bit challenging, especially if it happens without training support or the clarity around each of the various options that are available.